My name is Eric Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9 to 5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Eric here with the guest today, founders of Row House, Eric von Frohlich and Debra Strougo out of New York City. They are mom and pop business owners with CrossFit. A lot of people know about CrossFit, and they founded Row House and did not know how to scale it because there's a lot of different options to scale a mom and pop business. And we're going to dive into all of that in addition to the dark days before franchising, the fun stuff, the hard stuff, and what it takes to start out as a mom and pop, and then just their mindset and how they got to the point where they decided to scale through franchising and not the normal way that most people think. So guys, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having us.
Well, we were hanging out in Vegas, not really hanging out, like hanging out in the same coffee shop early morning when we were part of the Exponential Fitness conference there, which was amazing, by the way. But then we just struck up conversation because we kept finding ourselves there. And then I found out that you were the founders of one of those brands there. And I'm like, we need to get you guys on the podcast. So I'm super excited to get into this because it's not often I get to talk to founders that have scaled the way that you guys have. But take us back before Exponential Fitness, back before it was a franchise. Let's go into how you transitioned from like a CrossFit gym into like Row House. How did that even come about?
Well, in the early days, we actually wrote the business model for Row House before we opened our CrossFit gym. But we felt that the environment wasn't ready for the concept yet. We've always been a little early on concepts. Like CrossFit, I was interested in following in 2002.
Wow.
It took a while for that to come. I had other experiences where I was always too early to the game. I was doing jiu-jitsu in the mid 80s. I was powerlifting and had no one else to do it with me. Just scratching my own itch and finding my own passion. And then there's, this larger communities that seem to have followed that. And so it kind of started with us sitting down saying, if the gym's filled with treadmills and it's filled with elliptical machines and they're inferior products to the rowing machine, what's the problem with the rowing machine that people aren't, doing it more? I thought it was the best workout there was. And it just didn't make sense that there wasn't more rowing machines in every gym.
Well, let's back up a little bit because you said something like you've always paddleboarding before people paddleboarded. Like, what are you doing now that nobody else is doing?
I'm going to keep that one close to the vest.
One of these days, I'm going to figure that out. So that's a good point though, because I have a Concept 2 rower in my home gym. And when I first heard about Row House, I was like, there's no way I'm on a Concept 2 rower or any type of rower for 45 minutes. There's no way in the world because I know how spent I get after, being on that thing for 10 or 15 minutes. And then I experienced it for the first time and fell in love with it. So dive into like the experience that people have and why you had to hold off.
Yeah, I think the experience we wanted to create was we wanted a very inclusive brand. I find training a single modality kind of boring, whether it's an athlete or so. I always had with my own programming coming as a personal trainer and group fitness exercise instructor, found diverse populations that could be scaled into the same workout. And so we knew that was going to be important if we wanted to really grow and touch a community that I felt wasn't being served. I kind of always considered it an invisible population of people who had injuries that were a little bit older. The general fitness goer is, viewed as being 22 years old with disposable income and disposable time. And we kind of took it more from the approach of, this is such a great workout, it's low impact. Why can't we find a community, the 70% that need to work out, but something really isn't working for them? So we really kind of targeted the workout and the program and the core values around welcoming that person into the community and making them feel comfortable. And then we figured we could catch the rest of the market.
And the reason I think that we knew that those people would enjoy it is because we knew that ultimately, as the market was getting fitter and fitter, people would really want results. And having both been very involved in the fitness culture and the fitness market in New York City and beyond, we saw also the spin population just really,
Mhm.
really starting to increase, and that craze, and started to hear, people are recognizing that it's not actually changing their bodies. And so we knew that taking this concept and marrying that market interest with some people who are looking for results would actually be kind of that forward thinking wave. So that was something that was important to us to really kind of strike a good balance.
So then did you open up one location at first, or did you open up multiple at the same time?
Well, we opened up our CrossFit initially to get operational experience. I mean, I was doing CrossFit anyway. It was my preferred training modality.
Mm-hmm.
As an older athlete doing it, there's some drawbacks that I think people have experienced for as much as there's benefit. People who charge hard have a tendency to not hold themselves back or move as carefully through a system as they need to when they're doing something as diverse as CrossFit. So my idea was, let's open a CrossFit, let's get that operating, get me from being a group fitness instructor and a personal trainer into operating my own studio with my kind of principles wrapped around CrossFit. And then once we felt like we were decent operators, then we could launch the next concept, because we kind of felt like we still had time on bringing that concept to the market.
And at that time, any kids, family, or were you guys just completely, focused on building and learning CrossFit in that model?
I think we had one. Our daughter was already in the picture at that point. We were pregnant with our second child. I was working in the corporate world, having spent a lot of days kind of, at the desk, but also had a side hustle in fitness, teaching fitness, as well as getting involved in lots of fitness media, and really understanding also the difference between kind of like that New York City fitness and translates across the country, which was very, very important to us also in figuring out how to kind of set a formula for Row House to follow as it scaled, which, obviously is what came out of this. So we were kind of looking at ourselves saying we could do something together. We should do something together. We both have this super passion about fitness and helping people and changing lives and, empowering people and building community. But we both kind of are doing different jobs and have different strengths with regards to our livelihood. And understanding our specific strengths, I think, is something that also made this extremely popular and is something that we see a lot in people that come to franchising with significant others. Because you can't really both do the same thing, or you have to be on the same page. But, I brought to it things that Eric didn't, and Eric brought to it things that I didn't. So that was a really good, strong piece of why we felt that it was nice to work with each other.
And that's like a partnership in general. I mean, I've never, my wife and I ran businesses before, and then kids came, and she's full-time with the kids, which I'm experiencing right now because she had ACL, MCL surgery. So I am Mr. Mom and the business owner, and it's taking its toll on me, and it is not easy, but we've been in business together. Now I have partners. And so it's very similar, right? But you guys have to, go home to each other all the time. How did you guys, when you guys were in the thick of it, building it, the most stressful times, how did you guys manage the stress of that as a couple?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that's kind of our strength, was working well together, problem solving. We knew that raising a child and building a business. And so we kind of had a lot of faith and trust in each other's strengths. And we learned to not to step into each other's lane and trust that that person was going to put in everything that you were going to put in. The metaphor in rowing is keep your mind in the boat, which means do your job and do it really well and do it with the intensity and focus of what's required to be successful. And so we had that trust level there already. But it's hard because you have to flip on the dad hat, and then it's the business owner hat, and then it's the business manager hat, and that goes to, I was instructing at the same time. So then I'm the coach and the talent, and I'm the programmer, and Deborah's doing all the things Deborah's doing on operations and marketing and sales. And so it just takes a tremendous amount of trust and faith and hard work and acceptance to work through that.
There's so many things to do to get that business from a mom and pop when you're creating everything. And it's easy to, I get people that come to me and they want to buy a franchise, and I help them find some different brands, and they think, what am I getting for that franchise fee? But if they had to live in your life when you were starting the franchise, and then the directions that you could go, then they would start to appreciate the time and the effort and the trials and the error that went into building that brand. I think anybody listening to this podcast, if you're a franchisor, we're going to talk about some interesting things on how to grow and scale as a franchisor. But also, if you're a franchisee or thinking about becoming a franchisee, this is going to be interesting to you because your brand that you're looking at buying may be similar to this. And it gives you some insight into how it's built and how they chose to grow and scale it. And it's similar to what I'm doing in one of the brands that I'm about ready to acquire. But let's go back into your guys' story. You have a row house open, got your experience from CrossFit, have a row house open, and then you're in the thick of it, the challenging moments and the creating and the dark days as you're building it. Then you, like most mom and pops, people come and say, is this a franchise? And then you think, maybe I should franchise this. And franchising is a way to go for mom and pop businesses that are successful. And you can either continue to grow multiple units and go across the state or across the country as a mom and pop doing that, or you can grow through franchising. And there's different ways to grow through franchising. Take us back to that moment when you guys were having those conversations internally between yourselves on how you wanted to grow and scale.
Well, I think the discipline that comes in figuring that out is super important. We had a lot of people coming to us early on from Europe, from Kuwait, from South America, from just basically around the world. And we're one shop in New York City and we're drawing all this interest. It's flattering, but it's highly distractible. And so we kept saying, we're not ready for that yet. We're going to get there. I remember throwing shade to a couple of people who came in from London saying, this is a great idea. We want to bring it back to London. And I kept saying, well, I don't know if it's fully baked yet. I'm not sure if it really works. And I was just trying to slow them down from copying what we were doing. While we figured out how to get all our ducks in order so we could even look at the possibility of licensing, franchising, or growing in any other scalable way. But Deb was kind of the brains behind how we're going to approach that. And I think early on, it was we knew that franchising was a strong model to get to get alignment and partnership and scale quickly. But you had to have the right partner to do that.
So you were the brains, Deb. He was just saying you were the brains behind all that. So drop some wisdom on us. Like, what was going through your mind at that time?
I was the bank also. And I mean, it was my bank, it was our bank, but I was staring at the books every day. And so I think that's an important piece. We go back to what was the original goal? Our original goal was to go big or go home. I mean, that was really our intention. And I think that was kind of the intention in 2008. And by the time we opened that first studio, that studio opened in 2014, our first row house, Columbus Circle. And so that time period between 14 and really 16, you could argue, we potentially lost what is our main focus of this whole thing, because to Eric's point, there's distraction everywhere. Well, we could go this way, this way, this way, this way. And as you play out, what does that look like? What do those models look like? You have to ask yourself, do we have the core competencies to go in that direction? Will we succeed if we go in that direction? Will we get distracted from what we're doing here if we go in that direction? And what does that all look like? And where does that ultimately get us? And so we did explore a variety of different opportunities, and we did have a variety of different partners, and we could have gone the tech route, and we could have gone corporate owned, and we could have gone the franchising route. Um, but ultimately, when we said, yes, our goal is to go back to our original intention, is to bring this to more people and to touch more lives. That's when it became clear that the answer would be to go to a franchise strategy. We had become very successful in developing communities, growing a program. Our passion and our core competencies were really in doing that. We didn't want on the day to day to be focused and worried about what tool we're using, some other vendor related concerns, how to get the tightest margin on this and that. It's not to say we didn't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where we felt passionate. We felt more passionate in the community, helping people, adopt themselves to a program, looking at a program's adoption in our market and thinking about how it would be adopted in a different market given the demographic population and breakdown of that market, right? And so that's where we started to make some decisions with regards to how we were building even our program so that it could be very quickly replicable. By that point, we did have 2 studios. And we did look into franchising as an option on our own.
Mm-hmm.
And we did learn very quickly that that would be another whole complete hurdle. As it is, we had some great staff and team members that we were able to bring on. And, some other ones that we thought maybe we needed, and it didn't necessarily get us to a further place. And as you go through all of that and try to prove your financials for any sort of partnership, you recognize that getting to the next place is something that takes a lot of thought. So hopefully that answers your question.
It takes a lot of bandwidth away from you operating your day-to-day business, right? There's only so many hours in a day, and then you have a family to go home to as well. And so franchising factored in that we wanted to raise our family. We had a young family. We're very active parents. And I didn't want my kids being orphans to my business, or the business would be successful one day, but they never had a childhood that was with their parents.
And I see that as a mistake. As people have successful businesses, they have 1, 2, or 3 locations, and life is pretty good for them. And they have these bigger aspirations of doing bigger things. And they'll come to me and they're like, I want a franchise, Eric, and can you help me franchise my business? And I don't franchise people's businesses. That's not what I do, but I definitely give people help in that. I do invest in franchisors. So I understand as a franchisee what the franchisor goes through many times. And if they go from owning a couple locations to franchising it, they're now in a different business. They are not in the running my local locations with my community, doing what I'm good at. They go to supporting a bunch of franchisees and acquiring franchisees and growing that new entity. And it is a different business. And so when someone knows that they want to go the franchising route, there's still a couple of different options to go with. You can go it all by yourself and grow it from scratch. And at that point, I think people that want to go that route, they typically know what they're getting into. They want to grow and mentor franchisees and not be involved in the day-to-day of their own business anymore. They basically give that up, whether sell it to somebody else or that's now not their main focus. And a lot of times that business decreases in revenue and profitability and all of that. Or they can stay involved in that business. And I'm acquiring a roofing franchise. I'm in the middle of that right now as a franchisor. And the gentleman that owns that right now wants to stay have his roofing business. And we want him to be in that position. We want to come as a franchisor and put systems and processes and our expertise and our experience and our money behind it to grow it much faster than he could on his own. And that's a second option that people have. And it's not very common because it's not common to find the types of people out there that want to acquire franchisors like that. But you guys have a story where you partnered with somebody that is doing phenomenal things in the fitness space and bringing different fitness modalities under one house of exponential fitness. And you guys are one of those brands. So how did that even come to be? And what were the things that weighed on your mind, whether you should move forward with that or you should do it on your own?
Well, I think you put your finger right on it. There's completely different business models, and I think if you're not really aware of what your core competencies are and what's required for either one of those roles, you're almost doomed for failure. It's a pretty quick awakening when you're out of your skill set. So I think Deb could probably speak best to how the relationship came about with Anthony and the partnership and how that kind of accelerated. So I'm just going to let her keep running.
So Anthony Geisler is the founder of Exponential Fitness. He's been on the podcast before, and he started with Club Pilates and then had very much a success story with that brand, and then started to acquire different brands. So I wanted to set that up for you, Deb, on who Anthony Geisler is, and then how I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so everybody says that if you're going to get in bed with your partner, that you should have a long time leading up to it, right? Is that the right thing? And I will say that we certainly had that. We originally got to know kind of the guy behind Anthony even further back in 16 or 17.
Are you talking about Mark or somebody?
Yeah,
Mark.
Back in 16, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mark is like an incredibly brilliant man, by the way, right? I mean, he's just one of the smartest, financially savvy, understands things that I'll never understand. So this is who you got to know before Anthony.
Yeah. And certainly knows the market very well. And, I would say that that was also a good point of connection. We really, really understood kind of the market. That was something that was extremely important to us in positioning and also figuring out where we would bring Row House and how we would actually go out and brand Row House, because as you know, we had a CrossFit HIIT brand. But the thing was that we grew two separate brands at the same time. And people asked us that question, why are you growing two separate brands at the exact same time? Why do you have two separate teams? Why do you have two separate websites? And that was very, very important to us, because we wanted to prove to someone like Mark that this was a big white space opportunity for us. And so that was something that would take time. And we developed a relationship with him way back then, understanding kind of what we had to prove him through. But I think one thing that's even important to note there is this does not happen overnight. Partnerships like this do not happen overnight. You do not just go out and expand and create, alignment and scale overnight. And so we got to know him back in 15 or 16 and kind of came back to him because we knew that he was very involved in another big yoga brand, and had said to him, can you explain to us, some of the vendor requirements that you guys are making decisions on? And there were certain things in the operations model and that we had some questions with him about. So it was just kind of a coffee chat conversation where he said, we're thinking about putting together a franchise top platform. Mm-hmm. And it might make a lot of sense to bring Row House into that, because on the back end, we'll be making some of those operational type decisions. And then, you guys would come in on the front end and that be the vision. And so if so, I'll have someone for you to talk to. And so we ended up having a conversation with Anthony where I remember specifically him saying to me, I get it. You have a point to make. You have a baby and you want to see it brought to market. And that was really exactly it. And it brought us back to that place where we were the vision, the people mm-hmm. that ultimately we wanted to be, having proven already that there were financial economics associated with that. But now we're able to kind of hands off some of those decisions to somebody else.
And I've seen it go the other way, where someone is in your position and then they start the franchise on their own. And now they are not doing what they loved, and they find themselves in this position where they are now responsible for franchisees, because franchisees are looking to them to help them be successful. Or they just reach a point in their own skill set and they don't want to hand that over to a new CEO or COO to be able to take that franchise where it needs to go. So I think that's important for listeners who are looking at franchises or franchisees to understand capacity in the franchisor and where they are. Because that's something that's important to me as I look at buying different franchise brands, or I look at acquiring a franchisor, is to understand, is the leadership there able to scale to the next stage? And are they smart enough to step down when they know that their skill set and where their core competencies are not aligned or able to take that brand where it's really going and growing? And that's what everybody wants, is a brand to grow. So you made the smart decision for yourselves, right? I mean, you guys have talked about core competencies a lot on this episode, but like, you guys know who you are, what you want. You're not quick to make decisions. And that's, so opposite of what a lot of people are doing in today's world. So where did that come from? The ability just to kind of think critically, think strategically, and not just run into something.
Yeah, I think it's structure and discipline create a lot of freedom, give you a lot of opportunity, but you kind of have to live by the discipline of thinking through the situation instead of jumping and then looking. Mm-hmm. And so Debra's been an amazing partner in keeping me and keeping my skills in alignment with growing the brand and developing a brand. I wanted to really be focused on growing a community and touching and impacting lives. And she was constantly said, well, you have to be really structured and disciplined. You have to have something that other people can teach, not just you. Because I would have kept iterating and changing my programming, which would have diluted our product. And she kept saying, we have to put stakes in the ground that we're going to live by. So if we're going to row to the beat of the music, it's all the time. If we're going to row together, it's all the time. Started putting down foundational positive constraints in a way that allowed us to stay within the lanes and have the discipline that we needed to think through scenarios before we jumped. I think in large part it comes from you see a lot of other things happen over at a certain point in your life. I'm 50 years old, and I had a lot of other concepts that had come up that had enriched other people, and I didn't grasp the brass ring and hold on to it long enough to sit there and see those things through. By the time I got bored, I was moving on to the next thing, and someone else was capitalizing on something I created. So I think that, it doesn't, some people have early success. For me, it came a little later. And that discipline was just a part of our DNA to make sure that we knew what we were getting into.
When did you guys decide to make that decision to go with Exponential Fitness or Anthony? How long was it in that process that you guys were like, yep, this is it. This is what we're doing?
It was in 2017. We closed the deal in December, but we had really been talking about it since March. And to your point, we did lots of, heavy due diligence on their team. And one thing that I said to Eric is, I feel very stressed when I'm at the playgrounds with my kid, for example, because I'm not driving this ship. And when you went and saw his operations and saw his office and saw really honestly also the capital behind it, right? Because behind the team and all of that, you saw that there will constantly be people driving this ship. So if we want to see this brand come to fruition, we need to put it in a position where it's well capitalized and where there's a strong team and where somebody's driving the ship. And I can relieve myself of that stress because there's enough of a framework now that it could be handed over to somebody that's going to be able to keep it moving. Because we did see the market was starting to pick up in this space for rowing particularly, or specifically for rowing, as well as just in general, people wanting fitness franchises. We started to see a lot of people as we went out and franchised Row House, and as he was doing with the other brands, that were looking to get involved in franchises that were wellness or health related, because they wanted to have their own business in their own community, and they wanted it to be something that they felt like was for the well-being of the community. And so that also was nice for us once we really recognized that these are little mini entrepreneurs just like we were. And when we were trying to figure out how can we get the answer to this, and we were going through our LinkedIn and going through our personal, contacts in our cell phones and all that to try to solve the answers, we would be better suited now to help other people do the same thing, which would then help them be able to focus on what they bring to the table.
So instead of focusing all the legal stuff, all the franchise development, all the operations, all the franchisee questions and answers and all the corporate staff, you guys don't have to deal with any of that, do you?
Correct. And, there's branding, there's real estate, there's legal. You start running that list out and it becomes incredibly overwhelming. And I think something you touched on earlier, which is really important, is if you want to grow and you want to scale, you need to be able to delegate.
Mm-hmm.
That the curse of the entrepreneur is that they want to stay in 100% control all the time. We knew that if we were going to partner with someone, we needed someone to trust to trust them with this baby that we created. And when they were going to take it to the vision that we had for it. And so between Mark and Anthony and their success and their track record, and a lot of discussion and a lot of due diligence. I remember one time we flew into California for a 2-hour meeting, got back on the plane so we could be home for our kids to put them to bed. And, as crazy for as crazy as that is, that was the level of our commitment. We were willing to sit there and say, we'll do what it takes to make sure that it's in good hands and it's the right people. And at the end of the day, if it didn't work out, at least we felt like we had done everything that we needed to do to be successful.
What advice would you give to somebody that is at that point where they know they want to go the franchise route, but they are thinking about partnering with someone like myself or somebody with franchise experience to have a smaller piece of a bigger pie versus a larger piece of a smaller pie? What would you tell them?
Well, I think there's that quote, and it's been often attributed to a lot of people, so I'm not going to point to someone, but that you can have 100% of the pie in your own labor, or you could have 1% of the pie of 100 people's labor, and you're going to scale a lot quicker the more leverage you create. So I think the beauty of franchising is that it creates leverage that you can't do by yourself. So I think that's the biggest part. And it puts you in alignment with people who are going to be every bit as invested in the success of the brand as you are. If you hold on to that thing yourself, then you only have so many hours in the day. And I think that's a curse of the entrepreneurs trying to hold on too tight.
And also the network, right? So beyond the franchisor, franchisee, or franchise partner relationship is the network of other people that are in your same boat,
Mm-hmm.
franchise partner, as Expo calls them. And so, at Row House, our kind of motto or mantra is pulled together. And that's a part of the brands, it's part of the community, but that's also a huge part of the franchise network. And so you see just partners looking to support each other with regards to any which way that they can in terms of making decisions and, finding resources. And that's something that I think is hugely, hugely beneficial. I don't know that you can put any value on that. So it goes back to due diligence, any sort of deal. Just, kind of know the people that you're surrounding yourself with.
Well, guys, this has been fun. Any last bits of wisdom? I think this is so good for people that, it's great for people that are wanting to franchise their business. I mean, they're going to get a ton of value out of this. But I also think it gives tremendous amount of insight into the people that are looking at buying franchises to understand what it takes to start a franchise. And to understand the difference between a mom and pop franchise that is, doing it without franchise experience. They might bring in people with franchise experience at one point, but you can't grow fast. You can't scale quickly if you don't have franchise experience in that franchise model that you're creating. You guys couldn't have done what you guys have done with Anthony and Mark's help. Like, there's no way you guys Row House could be where it is today if it was just you, could it?
No, we knew that once we were successful, people would be looking to iterate off of what we did. And if we didn't capture the market with a strong partner, then it was just going to be a matter of someone else taking what we had built and what we had developed and then doing a better version of it because they were more capitalized and better organized and more structured.
Well, Eric, you're not going to tell me like what you're doing now that nobody else is doing. Deb, are you going to tell me what he's doing now that nobody else is doing?
Everyone says that there was never another Soul Cycle, right? And so that's the thing. Here we are, right? So people are copying things that we were doing 5 years ago. People are copying things that we were doing 3 years ago. And we're still iterating, and that's what it is. So hopefully the market will continue to get healthier and people will continue to grow their communities. And that's really what's important to all of us.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, dropping some wisdom out here and just sharing your story and your journey along the way. And I'll see you at the next convention.
Looking forward to it. Thank you
so
again.
much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.